Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos in Baltimore. We are Baltimore positively, relieved of our AFC Championship game responsibilities. I finally canceled my flight to Kansas City. I have not canceled my flight to New Orleans yet, but I'll be doing that. A cup of Super Bowl brought to you by the Maryland Lottery is coming your way. Super Bowl week. We will begin things at Costas, as well as our friends at Curio and Royal Farms, Jiffy Lube, throwing us out on the road. This guy has been a recurring figure in my life since my childhood of reading the Football Digest and Sporting News and other things. He is connected to St. Louis sports journalism forever, and the St. Louis Rams, and before that, the St. Louis Cardinals, and even before that, a Philadelphia guy who has made his living. Finally, he's made it to the desert. He's out there in Phoenix getting ready for pretty good spring training baseball. There is a rumor that I might be spotted in late February out in the desert at a Styx concert at the Celebrity Theater in Tempe, Arizona. Howard Balzer is our resident Hall of Fame voter. You can find him on the Sirius Radio Network, Sirius XM, and the NFL channel, as well as many other places out on the internet. The H-Man. How are you? How's life? I mean, I wanted to book you on and talk about Lamar, Kansas City, yeah, and it's a terrible week to have you on because we're doing the Requiem this week, Howard.
I get that. I understand it's the way it goes in the NFL. And I will say this, though. It shows how our musical tastes are a little bit different because I think in a couple of weeks, I will be at the Celebrity Theater for Tommy James and the Shondells and the Association.
Well, you're only a half a step behind me. I mean, all it's missing there is Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, maybe Hermits.
There we go. And I've seen them.
I know you have. You and Chip Namius, you're all over my timeline with all that, you old NFLers. Before I even get going, Celebrity Theater, I just want to say this out loud because everybody in my audience would say, why is he talking about Styx? Because I'm friends with Styx and I go see them places. I have very few bucket list things. Since I got thrown out of the NFL, I've been to 27 Super Bowls. My bucket list was to go to one in my life, and I did 27. I'm pretty good. I'm trying to find these bucket list things left to do, and the Celebrity Theater is one of them because it's a theater in the round. And here in Baltimore, we had Painter's Mill, and I know you being a Philadelphian, you had the Valley Forge Theater up there, where the old schoolers did theater in the round. The original association, I'm sure, played Painter's Mill in the 70s with Lou Rawls and Dinah Shore and some others. The Circle Theater, it's still worth doing, right? It's so uniquely bizarre, right?
No question about it. And the thing about it is they have great shows, and it's a great mix with who comes in there, and they have a cool place downstairs where you can hang a little bit before the show.
I'm going to get there early, Nestor. That's why I get you to get me all this information ahead of time.
Definitely do, because they have a bar and they have some, appetizers and all kinds of memorabilia on the walls. It's really a cool place.
That's why I want to go. There's the Hollywood Bowl and the Royal Albert Hall, because I've been to Lambeau Field and Fenway Park. I've been to all those other places,
And the Celebrity, it's a small place, and so there's no seat that's bad. And my wife and I, we've been to a few there. The one that stands out is Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues that was there and played.
Shares my birthday, so he's a good man. October 14th.
So yeah, it's a cool place to be.
Nights in white satin. Howard Balzer is here. Bring on the end of the season in a tragic, awful way for the Ravens. The Bills sort of perfected getting eliminated and bad things happen to them, and I hope that doesn't happen this week. I think we've all become a little closet Bills fans around here. But in the general sense of watching Lamar and the Ravens and this version attempt to do this, and we'll get the Bills going to try to knock off Mahomes this week too. Where are you with the Ravens in this Lamar thing and the Derrick Henry thing? Because this did feel like the best team that they assembled. Maybe not the best outcomes, penalties, other things. But, I mean, really a football tragedy to see Mark Andrews drop that 2-point conversion on Sunday night.
Difficult. Yeah, no doubt about it. And you, like you said, you thought that this very well could be the year, and especially with the way that Derrick Henry played. And not many people thought that he was still capable. They knew he was capable, but maybe not capable to performing at the level that he did. And then that happens at the end of the game. Now, having said all that, we have no idea what the result would have been had they tied the game. There was still a minute and a half on the clock and you never know what Josh Allen would have done with the ball. And then if he didn't do anything, what happens in overtime? You still never know. but for it to end that way was disconcerting, obviously. And certainly so much has been put on Mark Andrews. And I'll tell you, Nestor, it reminds me somewhat of the drop in the Super Bowl many, many years ago by Jackie Smith,
It
the
has
Hall
been
of Fame
brought up several times this week, for
because because he because it was similar in a way. It wasn't a great throw. I mean, it was a yes, it should have been caught, but it wasn't a great throw, just like the one that Staubach threw to Jackie Smith, where he had to go to the ground basically and be sitting down almost to try to catch it. If he gets it up high at his hands, probably basically an easy catch. I could go into a long story about what that Staubach didn't even want to run that play because it was meant to be done from the 5-yard line, not the 10. And so he threw it differently than he normally would. And so Staubach's taking some of the blame off Smith. And on that one, I mean, here's Mark Andrews kind of moving backwards and the ball's a little bit low. If it's up there in his breadbasket, it might be the easiest catch he's ever made. And so I'm not sitting here saying it's all Lamar Jackson's fault, but the throw contributed to the fact that the ball was dropped. And it's unfortunate. And obviously Andrews had the fumble earlier when the ball was punched out. That's football. That's football. I mean, those plays happen. And it's always amazing to me how games turn on those things. I mean, heck, you mentioned Hall of Fame. I don't want to get in a long discussion now, but the Eli Manning debate and argument is a tremendous one and all that, and what's going to happen there. But what everyone forgets is a couple of plays before the great David Tyree helmet catch. He threw a pass towards the sideline that went right through Asante Samuel's hands on the Patriots. If he intercepts that, the game is over. But he wasn't able to make the catch. And then we saw the David Tyree play, which for some reason Eli Manning is given credit for. I give him credit for avoiding the rush on that play. But that was just a miraculous once-in-a-lifetime catch. There was more David Tyree than anything. And a lot
it's like
of
giving
luck.
Bradshaw, immaculate reception credit. What?
Yeah, exactly. So those are the plays that define the history of the game. We see so many of them, and that's what turns a game in the other direction. And yet everyone has to have somebody to blame. And then at the end of the day, they'll say, well, the quarterback couldn't win the big one, and the coach couldn't win the big one, and all those things. But when you get in the playoffs, especially, the best teams are playing the best teams. And there's an old rule, Nestor, that I like to cite. It's kind of a basic rule. When you have two really good teams playing, guess what? One of them has to lose. And when that team loses, everything that happened, especially late in the game, becomes magnified. And that's obviously what happened there.
Howard Balzer's been covering the National Football League almost as long as I've been alive. He's out in the desert and still young and trim and waiting for the Cardinals to bloom again and spring training to bloom. But in the meantime, we're left with the questions here. And, you are a Hall of Fame voter. You're a historian of the game. I can't talk to you about the revolution of Lamar and what this has been over the last couple of years. Even what we're seeing Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes doing this week. The imitation of Lamar, that maybe the C.J. Strouds and Jaden Daniels would be a part of that Lamar's been on the front end of this and hasn't had success in the playoffs for lots of reasons, right? I mean, to your point, I mean, guys, I always talk about Joe Flacco. He won the Super Bowl in 13. The year before, he threw the pass and hit Lee Evans in the hand. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do better than that. But there is a point for Lamar where winning MVPs, and he might win another one in 2 weeks, right? That's not going to be good enough once it comes to Hall of Fame time, that you have to have this thing that is elusive. And, for everybody not named Mahomes and Brady, it's elusive. And even if you're Eli Manning and you win 2 of them, you guys are like, well, is it really good enough? So in the case of Lamar and what the offense has become and what Derrick Henry being added to this, and I've talked to all the DVOA guys and all the modern guys and some of you old schoolers. You're not the only one, old schooler I've been chasing around this week with Greg Cosell and John McClain, amongst others, just trying to put all of this into perspective. The way I used to do at the Super Bowl, I've said, if Art Modell called me from the grave and said, hey, I hear the Ravens have a good team, tell me about them. And I just gave the stats of Lamar. Well, the quarterback's young African-American. He threw for 4,100 yards. Wow. Yeah, 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, Art. Yeah. He ran for 900 yards, Art. No, Art, let me tell you the best part. The best part is the running back is going to the Hall of Fame, and his only comparable is Jim Brown. Like I don't even know where to begin. But Art, they didn't win. They got knocked out in the divisional.
No, that's the conundrum. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But the one thing I always say is that, Dan Marino and the Dolphins didn't have much postseason success during his career. John Elway didn't have much success during his career until they got Terrell Davis at running back and they had a running game. And the Dolphins really never had much of a running game when he was there. The Bills, of course, with Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed and James Lofton for a couple of years, they had tremendous talent and they got to 4 Super Bowls, but lost them all. And yet all those guys are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And so I
if Marino had Dickerson, it would have been different.
Well, yeah, you would think so. And the funny thing about the whole Miami deal is that it was almost as if Don Shula, the head coach for most of those 18 years, I think it was, that Marino played, it was almost as if he forgot everything he knew about football. When they won the Super Bowl and he was with the Dolphins, and in one of the Super Bowls, Bob Greasy, who's in the Hall of Fame, I think he threw 12 passes in the Super Bowl game, something like that, because they were able to run the ball so well. So it was almost as if
that was a running back committee with Kick and Greasy and Mercury Morris. I mean, it was literally, that's the way you thought of football at that point. And that was a little unprecedented to build 3 running backs in that way at that era, right?
The bottom line is having that running game support for your offense. I'll never forget one playoff game, and I believe it was against either San Diego or Pittsburgh that the Dolphins were playing, and they had the lead, and it was not much time left in the game, and they got the ball, and they couldn't run the ball. It's like Don Shula, again, forgot about what's important in football. It's not just building it around the quarterback, although you have to build around him, no doubt, but the running game has to be a part of it. They threw 3 passes in a bleed the clock situation, and they were incomplete, and whoever the other team was went down the field and won the game. And so it was just bizarre. And so those are the things, that Dan Fouts, with the Chargers, never got in to the Super Bowl. And those guys are in the Hall of Fame. I mean, like you said, what Lamar Jackson has done, I don't want to say it's revolutionized football, because a lot of players have done what he's done to a degree in the past, but he's revolutionized it to the extent that he does it with those numbers. And if that continues for however many more years he plays, and the numbers are just off the chart, if he doesn't have the Super Bowl or great postseason success, to me, at least, that should not tarnish his Hall of Fame legacy. Now, you might not put him in the class of the quote greats from the quarterbacks that won, but again, look at those quarterbacks that won. Terry Bradshaw. I mean, look at those offensive players he had. The defense, the running game, with Franco Harris, the passing game with John Stallworth and Lynn Swann, both Hall of Famers. Look at those guys that they had. The one thing I'll say, except for Derrick Henry, and that's just for 1 year, and who knows what it'll be going forward, he hasn't had, that for a sustained period of time. And so I think that has to be taken into account also. So again, to me, it shouldn't tarnish, but you might not put him in the greatest of all time, but I don't know why there's a rush to call everybody the greatest. I mean, Tom Brady is considered the greatest for one reason only, and that's because the team won all those Super Bowls with him. The team won. And I hate it, quite frankly, Nestor, when you hear people say he won or he lost. Well, no, he didn't. The team won or the team lost. And this is the ultimate team sport there is, where you have 11 guys on the field on each play, and each one has a specific job. And if one of them messes up, an offensive lineman, whoever it might be, that can blow up the whole play. And so to me, that's the biggest thing. But you hear that all the time. He did this, he did that. No, the team did, but you somehow have to separate that and make judgments on individual players in terms of their greatness and their legacy.
Howard Balzer is here. He is a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. He is out in the desert after spending many years in St. Louis and Philadelphia before that, covering the National Football League for many, many years. the Hall of Fame ballot up. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But the Derrick Henry Lamar 1-2 punch. And, I got to thinking about this a couple weeks ago when I got my Derrick Henry Houston Oiler throwback jersey that I've been wearing here, that I'll be wearing probably the rest of my life because he's going to the Hall of Fame. It was the notion that you just pointed out on your own, which is why you're a Hall of Fame voter. Staubach, Dorsett, right? Bradshaw, Harris, Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Eli Manning, Edgerrin James. Just go, you go through these Batman and Robin, and I even said peanut butter and jelly or salt and pepper, whatever it would be. And that is part of the component here for Lamar. And for me, I thought that once Mark Ingram left, it changed a little bit. Mark Ingram was a little bit of a grown up in the room when he had gotten here. He had won the Drew Brees thing. He brought all that. And it changed. They drafted Dobbins. They never got the productivity they needed out of the running back position. And I thought, Lamar's got to be the decoy, not the guy running into linebackers 18 times a week. That can't happen. And it happens so much. And the Derrick Henry thing, to me, I said they would be unstoppable if they ever got Derrick Henry. I wrote that at 2 different trading deadlines, believing that. Then they got Derrick Henry. Clearly they got stopped this week in Buffalo, but I do think there's a brilliance involved in it that history, and people like you that note history and vote on history, have an appreciation for. This really special, adding a still can do it Hall of Fame running back into this offense where they are. And there's a lot of talent here. And, Harbaugh's going to have to stand judgment when his day comes for why this does or does not win during this era. It hasn't won yet, but it hasn't been for lack of talent and success to a large degree, other than a fumble and interception and a drop 2-point conversion that eliminates you. But this has been, by any measure, old school guys like you or the DVOA guys that are doing all that. This has been a historic little weird thing that they've managed to put together here, this revolution of Harbaugh and this offense with Monken and before that, Greg Roman.
No question. And I think the one thing you have to look at, too, is that this league is a one-score league with the percentage of games that are decided by 1 score or less. The number is very high. And so that's the difference in those 1-score games. I mean, heck, we know with the Bills, losing that first Super Bowl and a missed field goal. And so, those are the things that have an impact. And let's also, Nestor, not minimize the impact for the Ravens of not having Zay Flowers in the game, your best wide receiver. Now, the other guys stepped up and did a nice job, but you didn't have one of your best guys for this game. We'll never know what the result would have been had he been there. And that's another deciding factor a lot of times in the NFL is the injury factor. I mean, the Ravens were pretty remarkably healthy for most of the season. I put together, in fact, the 8 teams that were playing over the weekend, they had one of the fewest number of players on injury reserve. Well, of course, Flowers isn't on injury reserve. And that, that was a factor, obviously, in that game. I mean, look at the Lions. I mean, everyone's acting all shocked at what happened at this game. And I call it collective amnesia, where everyone forgets what they said before the game. And then when it happens, there's this, oh my gosh, how could that happen? Well, what most everyone was saying about the Lions is, would all these defensive injuries come up to bite them in the postseason? And everyone said that. And then when they did, everyone acts like it didn't matter. I mean, this is a team that I looked at this the other day because when I do some national stuff on the website I write for, which is Cardinals oriented, I kind of like to do a connection to the Cardinals. And so I looked up the other day, the Lions played the Cardinals in week 3 and only beat them by a touchdown. The Lions had 6 starters on defense in that game that ended the season on injured reserve. 6 defensive starters. So it's one thing.
You're a different team at the end of the year than you are at the beginning. Totally. If you do it wrong, if you do it right, you stay full. The Ravens stayed as close to full as they could. They lost, and we're still talking about Zay Flowers, right? We're still talking about the one guy they're missing.
Lions gave up in the last 4 or 5 regular season, gave up 31 to the Packers, 48 to the Bills, 34 to the 49ers. Then they had the good game against the Vikings where they only gave up 9. Okay, the defense is fine. Well, that Vikings offense, even with good players on it, is not the Commanders with Jaden Daniels, and they didn't have any turnovers in the game. Washington did not, and they gained 400 and I think it was 481 yards in that game. And so that's injuries are real. A lot of people will say, well, that's an excuse. No, that isn't an excuse when you have a lot on one side of the ball or at one position group, and there's reasons guys are backups. And you can overcome it maybe sometimes with one or two backups playing. But if you've got six backups playing on your defense, that's a recipe for disaster at some point.
Howard Balzer's here speaking sense. He is out in the desert. He works for Sirius XM, still covering the National Football League as well as anyone. You can find him out at social media as well. The Hall of Fame vote is up. Before I get to that last thing, because we used to get together at the Super Bowl and talk about things, and obviously it might be Josh Allen, it might be Patrick Mahomes, who knows. But for my purposes now, let's just pretend it's the Chiefs. They're home, they're favored, whatever, if they win again. What we've seen here with Brady and Belichick in New England and then taking Brady to Tampa during the plague. And now what Mahomes and Andy Reid on the other side of this from the coaching standpoint. And Spagnuolo, throw Kelsey, throw them, that group into it. Jones too. All, the core of this Chiefs thing. This is it's an amazing time in sport where as a baseball fan, and I know you're a big baseball fan too, we're here in Baltimore trying to figure it out. The pitcher went out to the desert for $230 million, how much money you spend. There's no cap. In the NFL, everything's about parity and the draft and the best teams and the worst teams, level playing field. Green Bay can compete with the LA Rams, the whole deal. That these special coaches and whatever their system is, and then they find a quarterback and get a system around it. And the quarterback's so good that we have really underestimated even this Chiefs thing, that they're doing it again, that they're home again, that it wasn't a good enough one-loss year until they gave the last game away, that they weren't winning by enough, that they got lucky, blah, blah. Man, there ain't no luck. I mean, I don't know about this. Like, if they do this again and win again and somehow get like a depleted Eagles team or a rookie quarterback with Washington in the other end, there's no way I'll like the NFC team if the Chiefs win this week at home. What? I mean, the Chiefs are almost boring us to some degree, and we have moved to the point this week where everybody's a Bills fan because they're in the mafia, and the Bills have never won, and we feel sorry for them. I remember the Chiefs feeling sorry for the Chiefs forever. Lynn Elliott, and Joe Montana, and Marty Schottenheimer, the team who couldn't get it done. Now the Chiefs have become that, well, we don't like them anymore. They win too much.
No question about it. And, I think that the thing that gets overlooked a little bit with them, because it's all Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and obviously they are a huge part of it.
And Taylor Swift, throw her in.
And Travis Kelce steps up in that playoff game. But what's really won for them last year was the defense. And hardly anybody, hardly anyone talks in the same breath about Steve Spagnuolo, who has put that defense together. And if the Chiefs win this, as I said earlier, if the Chiefs win this game against the Bills, in large part, it will be because the defense will have found a way to just slow down the Bills' offense enough where Patrick Mahomes is in position or Kelsey are in position to make those plays when they need them. And so that's a big part of it. And they're excellent on defense. In fact, Steve Spagnuolo, who is the only coordinator on either side of the ball who has been on 4 Super Bowl winning teams. And my point, go back just quickly to the whole Eli Manning argument, that first game against the Patriots in the Super Bowl, which was the undefeated season for New England. And that was the David Tyree catch. And everyone says, well, here we go. Eli, he beat Brady. Well, no, he didn't beat Brady. The Giants defense beat Brady. That was a team that averaged over 30 points a game during the regular season, well over 400 yards. And in that Super Bowl, had less than 300, scored, I think it was 14 points in the game. And if it wasn't for the defense, the offense wouldn't have even been in position to score a late touchdown to win the game. And so that's what the defense obviously does for you. Keeps the game close and lets the great players on offense make the plays when they need to. And that's a big part of what the Chiefs have done, certainly over these last few years. And you can't, with Yeah, and most people I bet couldn't even name more than one guy on that defense, and the one guy is Chris Jones. But I bet people couldn't even name a lot of the other guys. The Nick Boltons and who I can't think of a lot of them off the top of my head. Leo Chanel. Oh yeah, everybody knows him, right? But they play great team defense and come up with big plays. And so, like I said, everyone will hail Mahomes, but if the Chiefs win this again, and they're one step away from getting there, obviously, it will in large part because of the defense also.
Had a bunch of the Pro Football Hall of Fame voters on here the last couple of weeks. Howard Balzer is with me right now. He has a ballot. The system's a little different than it used to be. We used to all get in a room together, and I'd run into you guys at the hotel on Super Bowl weekend on a Saturday, and I'm there having a good time going to Lee Steinberg's party. You're all like, Peter King's like, I got to pee, and I got to get back in there. We got to vote on Art Monk or whatever it is. You guys have all been doing this. Steve Smith, Marshal Yanda, and obviously Terrell Suggs on the ballot. You've made 3 or 4 references to your anti-Eli Manning stance here, Howard. I've caught this a little bit on the side. I'm partial to Eli because he seems like a nice human, and he survived the grinder of the Giants and won a couple of championships. The humor of him and his brother, and his father's a wonderful man. And I remember Eli doing my show when he was at Ole Miss back when I was syndicated many years ago. It was the only time I've ever had him on my show, but he was a kid. Now on the ballot, right? And with 2 championships that you're trying to take away from. Billick would always say, like when he would give his speeches, I go out with him when he's partnered with our company. He'd have his ring and he'd show the ring. He'd say, see that? That's my Super Bowl ring. And this is all his speech. You can hear his voice in. That's my Super Bowl ring. He's like, they tell you that once you win a Super Bowl ring, they can never take it away. But that doesn't make them stop from trying. So in Eli Manning's case, you're not trying to take away his rings, but they were, interesting years. In your mind, what makes a Hall of Famer? And I would ask this to you, and I want to give a quote to the late, great Phil Jackman, who left us a few months ago, who was a Baseball Hall of Fame voter. And I was a very young, impressionable kid, Howard. I'm in the car. Phil was an old, salty, curmudgeon sports columnist from Massachusetts in the Evening Sun. He loved hockey. And we would go to hockey games. We would talk about all this stuff. And I would always say to Phil, what possesses you to not vote for a guy in the Hall of Fame this year and then the next year put him on the ballot? They either are or they aren't. Well, he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. And he would go through this whole thing with me and I swore, like, if I ever got a ballot, and I was on the baseball beat long enough that if Angelos didn't buy the team, if Bill DeWitt bought the baseball team, I'd be a Hall of Fame voter in baseball, probably a Hall of Fame voter in football at this point because I wouldn't got thrown out of either one of them. But the Hall of Fame thing, I've always wanted to be on. I feel like I'm qualified, like all of that, humbly and all of that. But what you guys get put through, even every time you're on a sports radio show with me, why isn't Art Modell in? What's going on? Give me your philosophy, because I would have my own philosophy if that guy's in, is not in. It'd be very hard to convince me a guy is or isn't, but you've tried in the Eli Manning thing in your persuasive way. But first off, you've been qualified for a long time. You've been a Hall of Fame voter. But I think all of you have a different mindset about how you go about your vote and listening to all the information. And I think the most important thing all of you do is you really do get in and fight it out, and you talk about it and you listen. And I think it's important to do that when you're on the committee, and I commend all of you for that. But you're all wrong about Art Modell. I just want to say that out loud because I can't let you get away with it.
I appreciate those comments. And the other thing that we all do is we talk to people also. There's people who throw little barbs our way, and we get it. That's part of it. But it's like they say, well, they didn't like that guy or this or that. Well, I always say, hey, if you make it as a 15 finalist, that shows that as a group, there were enough people voting for him that felt he was, worthy of being discussed as a potential Pro Football Hall of Famer. So this whole thing, you don't like the guy, or you have something against him, or like you said, or you voted against him. I always say this: we vote for people, and that it's one of the most humbling, the hardest thing that I do every single year when you get that ballot, especially in the preliminary stage.
I know how sacred all of you take it, and I've seen the process that gets Heisman's in baseball, and it's not. going back to Pete Rose, and my cousin's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So, I mean, I don't want to piss on the Baseball Hall of Fame, but the whole thing's become a little bit of a circus. And you all need to really make sure that doesn't happen with the football side when art's being thrown at because somebody doesn't like him. And like the Baseball Hall of Fame where Marvin Miller could never get in because, like, the only got to change the game. Fundamentally change it. Like, so, I mean, I understand the politics. I feel like there's less of it in your room. I really do. I feel like your thing's a little bit more sacred than not letting sticks into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as an example.
And the one example I always use in terms of quote liking someone is Warren Sapp. I mean, there was a guy that many in the media didn't like at all. He didn't treat the media with respect for the
He
most part.
disrespected my wife in front of me. My wife, as you know, one of the most beautiful women on earth. Guy did something to my wife that probably would have gotten him punched in any other circle, like literally, you know what I mean? Like, so when it comes to Terrell Suggs, who's on your ballot this time, and I know you're not allowed to consider this, you appreciate this. How long you been a sports writer, Howard? How many years?
Long time. In fact, after this Super Bowl is over, I will be beginning my 50th year covering pro football.
Have you ever stood in a locker room, in a football locker room on a Wednesday afternoon with your notebook out or your tape recorder, or even if you're just standing there like I often did, just listening, observing, because it's all on tape now anyway, and had a football player take his pinky, go like this, put it in his mouth, and stick it in your ear while you're in a press conference?
No, that's never happened.
Yeah, Terrell Suggs did that to me. So, like, and when I smacked his fat arm because he's 3 times my size, I said, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, these are the things that, like, I couldn't be in a room with a guy that sprayed bleach allegedly on his, like, but none of that gets counted. And every time I bring it up, all of you are like, "Nah, none of that matters." And I'm thinking it all matters, and I guess it matters in OJ. God rest his soul. Thoughts and prayers. But like for any, I think character's an issue, and I think baseball's taken it a whole different level and like all of that. But I do think that there's an issue for your Hall of Fame that you try to really keep it between the lines. Everything I said about Terrell Suggs, none of that matters. And I'm okay with that. And I've even said that if I had to vote between Suggs, Yanda, and Smith, I think Suggs will get in first. I've said that, but that's been disputed already this morning by John McClain that said, no, Yanda will get in first. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the fever is in your room. I watched all three of them play. And here I go back to Phil Jackman. Here's where I go. And by the way, Hines Ward's a Hall of Famer, and I'm a Baltimore guy, right? I can't believe he's off the ballot. Like, that's crazy to me he's off the ballot. It's crazy to me Art's not in. But to me, Yanda, Smith, and Suggs, they're all three Hall of Famers to me. Like, to me, I watched them all play through their career. If I were in the room, I'd be hard-pressed to vote, to your point, against any of them, but they would all have my vote eventually. Maybe not in for me, it's the order. For me, it's the order of all 15 of these guys that you're about to talk about. I don't know how Hines Ward got thrown out of the room or how you get back in, or Reggie Wayne. To me, I don't know that I think Reggie Wayne is. So you'd have a hard time convincing me, but then you go in there and I am sure you have voted for some people that maybe you didn't think you were going to vote for. Is that right? Am I right in saying that?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's been times where you just listen to what's being said and you say, yeah, all of a sudden your eyes get open. I'll complete my earlier thought about Sapp in that he wasn't liked, but yet he went in on the first ballot. And so that was my point there. And
well, Terrell Owens was a great player that was divisive in all of these things, but I'd have to vote to put him in, I guess.
He did. I think that not voting for certain things was a big discussion with that, because a lot of the stuff that he did, quote, off the field, off the playing field in games, he did a lot of divisive stuff in the locker room and things like that.
Steve Smith punched teammates. I saw him do stuff to media members that was disgraceful, despicable. Things that, honestly, Chad Steele and Kevin Byrne, if they were doing their jobs and they weren't, would have gotten more involved. You know what I mean? Because these are athletes. They're very, I mean, Marshal Yanda got pissed at me one day, and like, I'm good with Marshall, but like, I've seen things that have made me think differently of people and places in different ways. And then you find that they punch teammates and different things like that. I think that is a factor. You know what I mean? Like, being a great teammate, being a great leader, That's really important. To me, it's fundamental about whether I want you to be my friend, whether I want you to be my family member, whether I want you in my room with me. And that would force me to think about Terrell Suggs differently, is to say, could I have won without him? Would I have wanted a different kind of guy on my team? And in some cases, Terrell Owens and some other players have been that way. I think.
Oh, a lot of great points. There's no doubt. And I don't, and no one's been quote thrown out of the room, but other people get the votes. And Hines Ward is one of those guys that the complete receiver didn't compile great numbers, right? A great blocker, physical, and all those things.
He's a winner.
But other receivers with numbers have jumped over him. Whether it's Terrell Owens, whether it's Randy Moss, whether it's Andre Johnson.
And even if they're cheap late yards on a blowout bad team, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's why the stats can be very misleading, I think, in football. In any game, they can be misleading.
Sometimes they can be. And Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt have been finalists. This is the 6th year for both of them. And I'm partial, full disclosure. I present the St. Louis guys, the Rams guys, and I've been presenting Torrey Holt. And you mentioned there's kind of an order. I think Torrey Holt would have been in already had he not been eligible for the first time at the same time as Orlando Pace, Kurt Warner, and Isaac Bruce. So there was kind of a pecking order. This is already Torrey Holt's 11th year of eligibility.
Yeah, he's being penalized for being on a team that was too good.
Yeah, in a sense. Yeah, in a sense. He's there and people keep voting for him, but he's just not able to take those next steps. So that's what makes it all difficult. And the bottom line is each year we get 15 finalists and a maximum of 5 can get in. And that means there's 10 guys that are disappointed. And this year you mentioned Suggs and Yanda. They're 5. I think sometimes there's a little too much of a rush to put first-time eligible guys in because that takes the spot away from others who have been waiting.
Well, that's where the Eli Manning question comes in this year that, maybe he's a Hall of Famer, but let's not compare him to Peyton and Tom Brady based on the body of work. And to your point, I don't say there's no lucky Super Bowls. That's disrespectful to Trent Dilfer. It's disrespectful to anybody that's won, but there is, Joe Flacco's won. He's not going into the Hall of Fame, and he was a really good player for a long time, but not good enough.
And Drew Brees, with all the 5,000-yard seasons, won Super Bowl. People act like it's easy to win a Super Bowl. So, but like you said, I think the key words you said there was body of work, and that's what you have to look at. Listen to what everybody says, the people that they say they talk to, and then try to make the best decision you can. And the other part of it, Nestor, is this, and no one ever knows that, at least Baseball Hall of Fame, they announce, and there's only one vote. There's no reduction votes and all that. There's one vote. You got to get 75%. And then they announce how many votes everybody got. So you can see that a guy, oh my God, he missed by 5 votes or something like that. Well, in our cuts, the first one to 25, and then to 15, and then to 10, and then this year, the new process voting for 7. You never know who was 26th, right? Who was 16th, who was 11th. They probably, with only, baseball has over 400 people voting. We have 49. So the chances are that a couple of the guys that missed the reduction vote might have missed by 1 or 2 votes. But we don't know that. They don't tell us how many people got votes. And so, but there's this whole notion, they were against this guy. They voted, they didn't vote. Well, I'm sure people did, right? But they didn't get enough to move on. And like I said, probably missed by very few votes. And I've advocated for not necessarily announcing everyone, but give us the next 2 or 3 guys that were really close to making the reduction, because that can be helpful perhaps the next year when you're voting again and knowing how close some guys were. We can only guess that they were, but we don't know for a fact. And that's one of the realities of the Pro Football Hall of Fame process that I think a lot of people don't think about and realize.
Well, if Marshal Yanda, Steve Smith, or Terrell Suggs don't get in the Hall of Fame, it's all Howard Balzer's fault. He is here. He's the H man out in the desert in Arizona. And if Eli doesn't get in, I'll know that you stood up and made it. For me, great players and their accomplishments. I love the Hall of Fame. I love what it stands for. I hope to get out there and visit again sometime. And I know they've been changing it, making it better. I mean, at one point it was a little more antiquated. We've always had that issue here in Baltimore. I would hold up my Baltimore Colts belt buckle for you about the records and the Colts and stuff like that. And it was like there was some point late in the season where I was watching a game and they're like, "Yeah, the young running back's about to break Lenny Moore's franchise record," and I'm like, "Ah." That's when you kick me in the nuts, Howard. That's when you really get after my chart. You kick me in the crab, is what you do here in Baltimore. I hope life is good for you out in the desert. They got a football team out there. I know the Rams moved that game out to the Dome. There were a lot of people out there. You got spring training going on, and we got a Super Bowl 2 weeks away as well. It's always good to visit with you. Put some good ones in the Hall of Fame. What's up with Art Modell's candidacy? Does he go to some senior committee thing now where you guys will sneak him in the side door now that he's been dead 10 years?
On the contributors list, there's a separate contributors category, and he's been on that. And there have been some advocating for him, and his name has been on there. And so maybe it'll
Could
happen.
his name come out next week as in? I'm only asking, like, when's the next time he could like be in it and get in?
The contributor, only one person comes out of that committee to be able to be voted on by the full committee. And this year was a guy named Ralph Hay, who was one of the founders of the National Football League back in 1920. So it won't be this year, but next year it'll go through the same process, and it's possible that he could be there. And I'd like to say one quick thing, if I can, just about
Who do I write to nominate? That's what I need to know. Who do I need to call? Hey, Fearley, I'm looking. Who am I
just
calling?
email the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Fans, everybody can nominate people, and Art Modell has been on that nominees list, and that's been the case now for a few years. But the one thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned the first timers as opposed to other guys and all that. And there's a lot of people think that the first time eligible, and we have long discussions about players every year. And a lot of people think that for a guy to at least be a first time eligible, he should be the guy where the presenter stands up and says, "I present Jerry Rice for the Pro Football Hall of Fame," and then drop the mic and have nothing to say.
Eli's not that guy, right? No, there's nobody this year's that guy, right?
No words are needed, and then you don't have to discuss it. Well, I've been on this committee a long time. I'm still actually considered the Los Angeles Rams selector on the committee because they've never found anybody in LA that they feel should be on it. And so I've been parts of the presentations for Orlando Pace, Kurt Warner. I've been done the opening presentation several years for Isaac Bruce, now Torrey Holt. I'm kind of looking forward to hopefully that I'm still doing this in about 5 years, and I'm still the Rams guy, where I can stand up and say, "I present Aaron Donald for the Pro Football Hall of Fame," and drop the mic, and I won't have to prepare or make a presentation, and there won't be any discussion afterward. There's very few of those type of guys. And many, like I said, many believe that those are the ones that those are the only ones that should get in on, in that first year of eligibility.
Fitzgerald might be that guy next year, right?
He could, he definitely probably will be. And even I'm here in Arizona, Kent Summers, who's been covering the Cardinals for years and years and years.
Man, Kent Summers.
Yeah, he's the Cardinals representative. And so I joke with him, "Are you going to retire from the committee once you're able to do the mic drop for Fitzgerald?" And he just laughed and said, "We'll see." But I'm sure he'll appreciate being able to do that. He was the main presenter for Aeneas Williams, who played most of his career in Arizona, even though I chimed in for his time with the Rams, along with Bernie Miklasz, who was on the committee then. But yeah, Kent.
Now, Bernie and I worked together on my first job at the News American. So, when you say Bernie, I know what you're talking about.
Yep.
People in this town know Bernie Miklasz. People in Philly and St. Louis and all over know Howard Balzer. I knew him when I was a young boy reading his work. He's out in the desert. from the Hall of Fame thing, I wish all of you well. I know it's not easy work, and getting all these guys in, and we'll worry about Lamar when the time comes for Lamar. And you on the Rams thing, I mean, you got to bring back Fred Dreyer for all his contributions with Hunter, to add him to the ledger for the Rams. By the way, I saw Torrey Holt running around at that game last week out in Arizona, and I said, "Hey man, looks like Hall of Famer Torrey Holt." So I would vote for Torrey if I were in. And he was a good man too. So hey, listen, I wish we were talking about the Ravens in Kansas City this week, or the Ravens going to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, but we're not. But it's going to be a good off season. And if I get out to the desert, to the Celebrity Theater to see Styx, I'm calling you, Balzer. We're going to go have a proper cheeseburger out there or some proper nachos out in the desert. All right.
Good. Look forward to it, man.
Howard Balzer, my friend from Sirius XM Radio and Hall of Fame voter extraordinaire for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, as we all have eyes on Marshal Yanda, Steve Smith, and Terrell Suggs here. I can't imagine. I am back for more. We are BaltimorePositive.com. Stay with us.